Alright, all praise to Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, double honors to the elders of GMS, and shalom to the brothers out there that's pushing the truth and Trubus and Sadie. My name is, I'm Noah Allen. With me I have,
I am Yahweh.
um, yeah, through the spirit of, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, we want to do this lesson because you had this nigga Izar who did this show. In the show, he said, the Apostle Paul was indoors for 2 years, which he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. He just looked at the scripture and assumed that Paul would just stand in the house. If you understood the reason why, then you wouldn't have made that foolish statement. But through the spirit of Yahweh Shemiel Shah, uh, we're gonna go into that, Lord will. So the first scripture we're gonna get is what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you basically like a chronological history of what led up to that point in Acts 28th chapter. So can you read that out?
Right, this is Acts chapter 21, verse 27.
Yep.
And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in
Read
the
that again.
the Jews
Read that from
from the
top
top,
again.
okay. Acts 21 and 27 again, it says, and when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were in Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him.
Now this is the Apostle Paul in Jerusalem. When you go back early in the chapter, you had a prophet named Agabus from Judea who took the Apostle Paul's girdle and girded his own hands and feet and said, "So shall this happen to the man that goeth up into Jerusalem, and he shall be delivered into the hands of the Gentiles. That shall happen to the man that owneth this girdle." So when the Apostle Paul was going to go into Jerusalem, he was going to be grabbed up and bound by the Jews and be brought before the Gentiles. And the men that were with Paul told him, "Don't go up to Jerusalem," but through the spirit of Yahweh Shah had the Apostle Paul go up there anyway. So continue on.
Verse 28, crying
So
out.
basically, we're gonna go into certain parts in each chapter, chapter 21 over to chapter 28, to give you the chronological order why the Apostle Paul was in that predicament that led him being indoors, that led him being um in the position that he was in Acts 20th chapter. Read on.
Verse 28, crying out, men of Israel, help. This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law
That's a lie. Go ahead. Go
in
ahead.
this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple and have polluted this holy place.
Go on. So these were the accusations that these Jews had came up with against the Apostle Paul. Go on.
Right, in this verse 29, for they have seen before with him in the city Trophimus and Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. Verse 30, and all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and
Go on.
forthwith the doors were shut.
Go on. So they grabbed Paul up and took him out of the temple, and the doors were shut. Read on. Verse 31.
All right, verse 31, and as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band.
Which that chief captain was Claudius Lysias. That'll be explained later on. Read on.
Chief captain of the band and all Jerusalem with an uproar.
Was in and that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. Continue.
Who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left beaten of Paul. They left beaten of Paul. And to go to the next verse, it says, then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains.
So the Apostle Paul was bound in 2 chains. Read on.
And demanded who he was and what he had done.
So he commanded Paul to be bound in 2 chains, and he demanded to know who Paul was and what it was that he'd done for all of this to occur. Go on.
And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty of the tumult, he commanded him to...
For the tumult. Sorry, every word that's there.
Right.
Go ahead.
For the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers for the violence of the people.
Go on.
For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, away with him. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek?
Go on.
Art thou not that Egyptian which before these days madest up an uproar and led us out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers?
Be a little bit faster. Go ahead.
Okay. But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a, a city in
Cilicia,
Cilicia,
which is in Galatia, also known as Anatolia or Asia Minor. Read on.
Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with his hand unto the people. And when they were, and then, and when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying,
So, what have we learned thus far? That the Apostle Paul was in Jerusalem. Now he's being grabbed up by the Jews. And the chief captain, like I said, had taken Paul from them, had him bound in two chains, and commanded the Apostle Paul, commanded who to know who the Apostle Paul was and what it was that he's done. So now the Apostle Paul is speaking, and now he's saying, "Allow me to speak unto the people." He beckoned with his hand now. Now he's speaking to the people. Read verse. Now you're in the 22nd chapter now.
right,
Read verse 22 to verse 30. Let me jump down real quick.
all right,
Go ahead.
all right, Acts 22
And 22.
and 22 on to 30. And they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted
Now
up.
notice we skipped the first 21 verses. The reason why we skipped it is because the Apostle Paul is basically giving you the rundown of basically like his life as a Pharisee unto being converted. He's going into how he was a Jew of the city of Cilicia, of Tarsus, which is in Cilicia. How he came under the feet of Gamaliel, who was a Pharisee. How he persecuted the men and the women that believed in Yahweh Shai, because you have women that believed as well. Um, uh, and how on his way to Damascus, Yahweh Shai came unto him, said, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And you know how he was blinded, how Ananias had healed him of his blindness. Um, Also how he had Stephen slain, so on and so forth. So now, read that.
All right, Acts 22 and 22. And they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voices
You can read that in Acts the ninth chapter. Go ahead.
and said, away with such a fellow from
Acts ninth chapter, Acts 7th chapter. Go ahead.
away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live.
They wanted to kill him. Go ahead.
And as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he
Yeah, they
might,
bade that he should be examined by scourging. Go ahead.
that he might know wherefore they cry so against him.
Read on.
And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned?
So Paul says it's lawful for you to scourge a man that's a Roman and is uncondemned. So Paul is flexing his rights right there as a Roman citizen. You know.
When the centurion heard that, he went out and told the chief captain, saying, take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, tell me, art thou a Roman? He said, yeah. And the chief captain answered, with a great sum obtained I this freedom. And Paul said, but I was freeborn.
Go ahead.
Then straightway they departed from him, which stood have examined, which should have examined him. And the chief captain also was afraid, after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. On the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he loosed them from the bands and commanded the chief
From his
priest
bands.
from his band, excuse me, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them.
So now on the morrow, what happened was he wanted to know why these accusations that came was the Jew. Why was it that these Jews that came up with these accusations against Paul? So he had loosed Paul from his bands, and he commanded the chief priest and the council to appear, and Paul to be brought down, and he set Paul before them. So now this is the Apostle Paul speaking before these Jews. Look at the next chapter, Acts 21. Acts 23, verse 1 to 10 now.
All right, Acts 23, 1 to 10, it says, and Paul.
So now the Apostle Paul was loose from his bands, and now the Jews they was to appear, and the Apostle Paul was going to be brought down, and the Apostle Paul was going to appear before them. So now they're going to say, well, um, this, that, and third against the Apostle Paul. They're going to say their part against Paul, and Paul going to say their part against them, his part against them. Go on.
And Paul earnestly beholding the council said, men and brethren, I have lived in a good conscience before the Most High until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Then said Paul unto him, The Most High shall smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me against the law? I'm sorry, to sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law?
Yeah, you go to like for example Leviticus 19:35. It says, "Thou shalt do no unrighteousness in judgment, nor in meat yard, and in measurement." I'm not quoting it verbatim, but you have to look that up yourself.
The
Go ahead.
precept is there too.
So yeah, all right,
Yeah.
go ahead. Good.
Verse 4 says, And they that stood by said, Revilest thou the Most High's high priest?
Go ahead.
Verse 5, then said Paul, I wish not, brethren, that he was the high priest, for it is written, Thou shalt not speak evil of the ruler of thy people.
So Paul, like I don't acknowledge him as no high priest, man. You know, because the nigga wasn't right. Go on.
But when Paul perceived that one part was Sadducees and the others Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, of the hope and resurrection of the dead. I am called in question.
Which that was the real reason why they had brought up all them accusations against Paul. That's the real reason because those are the things that the apostle Paul was speaking about that caused up a big stir. Go ahead.
And when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees
And
said,
also, him bringing in the Israelite foreigners, known as Gentiles in the scriptures, which are Israelites. Go ahead.
yeah, when it said Greek before, that was talking about Israelites in the previous chapter. But verse 8 it says, For the
No, when
Sadducees.
it said speakest thou Greek?
Oh
Can thou
no,
speak Greek?
the first chapter. Remember, it said they accused him of bringing the Greeks
Oh
to
yeah,
the
yeah,
temple.
yeah. That's more Jakes. Go ahead.
All right. Verse 7. And when he had said so, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees said that there is no resurrection, neither angel nor spirit, but the Pharisees confess both.
So you had these two groups of Israelites, these Sadducees, these Pharisees that came up against Paul. And when Paul perceived that one part was Pharisees and the other was the one part was Sadducees and the other was Pharisees, the apostle Paul said, "Well, hope of resurrection of the dead, I'm calling the question." Which that would bring up a big stir because the apostle Paul knew that it was the Sadducees and the Pharisees against him. He said, "Well, the resurrection am I brought into question." Well, wait a minute. The Pharisees confess that, but the Sadducees don't. So these two groups of people that came together as one against the Apostle Paul, that one statement he made split the two groups up.
Right.
You know? So now they was all bugging out and shit. Like you niggas is bugging out today. Go ahead.
Verse 9. And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees part arose and strove, saying, We find no evil in this man, but it but if a spirit or an angel have.
Read from here, because them words is small. If that's
Okay,
making you
con.
mess up.
Right, it says, And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees part arose and strove, saying, We find no evil in this man, but if the spirit or an angel have spoken to him, let us not fight against the Most High.
Read on.
And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled, and pieces of them commanded the soldiers to go down and to take him by force from among them, and to bring him into the castle.
Now we're gonna jump to verse 20 verse 23. So now the apostle Paul has spake before the high priest and before the elders who was brought before him, right? Who had appeared before him. So now we're gonna read verse 23 on down. Basically, the part that we had skipped was how you had the 40 Jews that had bound themselves under a curse that they was not gonna eat or drink anything until they had killed Paul. And when Paul's sister's son had heard of that, he had went unto Paul and he had told him. And Paul had called one of the centurions and told him to bring that young man to the chief captain. And when he was brought before the chief captain, which is Paul's nephew, he told them that you had the 40 Jews that sought to kill Paul, so on and so forth. So now, what the chief captain is doing is, he told the young man to go and don't tell nobody that you told me these things. And this is the act that this chief captain, who was Claudius Lysias, has done upon now knowing that the Jews had sought and lying in wait to kill the apostle Paul, being told that by apostle Paul's nephew, who was his sister's son. Read from verse 23.
All right, Acts 23 and 23. And he
So
called.
basically giving like a chronological order, you know.
Right. And it says, And he called unto him 2 centurions, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 3 score and 10, and spearmen 200 at the third hour of the night.
That's 470 because it said 200 soldiers, horsemen 310. That's 70. So that's 270. Spearmen 200. That's 300. That's 470. Go ahead.
And provide them beasts that they may set Paul on and bring him safe unto Felix the governor.
Yep.
And he wrote a letter after this manner: Claudius Lysias unto the most excellent governor Felix sendeth greeting.
That was the chief captain. Go ahead.
This
Claudius Lysias was the chief captain. You jump, you move it up, move it down. Go ahead.
okay. This man was taken of the Jews
Apostle Paul. Go ahead.
and should have been killed of them. Then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman.
You doing?
And when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth into their council, whom I perceived to be accused of questioning of their law, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds.
And that's what he did. He brought them. He brought him forth into their council. That's why it tells you that in the last verse of Acts 22nd chapter and the beginning verse of Acts 23rd chapter. That was when it was brought before the apostle Paul, or rather when Paul was brought before their council. And when he says, "Whom I perceive to be accused of questions of their law," but he said he didn't find nothing laid to his charge that was worthy of death or bonds. Continue.
Okay. And when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man,
By his sister's son, his nephew. Go ahead.
I sent straightway to thee and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him.
So now
Farewell.
farewell. So now in his letter, Claudius Lysias has written to the governor, which is Felix. He said, when I heard that the Jews laid in wait for this man, I sent him unto you, and I gave commandment to his accusers, which was those Jews, right? Also to say before you what they had against him. So in other words, these Jews are gonna come up to you and they're gonna speak the thing that they have against the apostle Paul. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm ready to bring it
Yeah,
up.
verse 31, 35.
Okay. Then then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to
Antipatris.
Antipatris, excuse me. On the morrow they left the horsemen to
Antipatris. Go ahead.
go with him and return to the castle, who when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was, and when he understood that he was of Cilicia,
So the apostle Paul was brought before him, brought before Felix. And when Felix the governor read the letter, he said, "Well, what province are you?" Go ahead. And what did Paul say?
he was of Cilicia.
Go ahead. What is in Galatia? Go ahead.
I will hear thee. And he said, when thy
Which, if
accusers,
I'm not mistaken, the Romans called that land Galatia, and the Greeks called it Asia Minor, which is small Asia because that's the western side of Asia. Go ahead.
I will hear thee, said he, when thy accusers are also come.
So remember, we just read the letter and how Claudius Lysias, he said, "I give commandment to his accusers to say before you what they had against him." Now, hold on, let me go. Remember, Claudius Lysias said in the letter what? He said, I sent them unto you. I'm sending the apostle Paul unto you, right? Now, his accusers is gonna come before you, and they're gonna tell you what it is that they got against him, what it is that they want to say. It told you that right here. See? Now that's why in the 30th verse. Now that's why Felix is saying, "I'm going to hear you when your accusers come," because that was in the letter. And it said he read the letter, right?
Right.
It said that right here. Continue.
And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall.
Now, so now you understood that. So now we understand in the chronological order. He was gathered up in Jerusalem. He spake before the Jews, right? The Jews. He went before their council, and when he went before their council, it was a big dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees concerning what he spake of according to the resurrection. Then he had the 40 Jews that bound themselves under that curse to not eat or drink anything until they had killed the apostle Paul. Paul's sister's son, his nephew, found that out, told the centurion, who then took him to the chief captain Claudius Lysias and told him of that. Now Claudius Lysias is taking the apostle Paul with 470 soldiers and is bringing him unto Felix to appear before Felix, and his accusers are going to come and they're going to appear before Felix as well. Now read Acts 24th chapter, verse 1 to 21. We're reading it, given to you in the chronology. I'll just say in that maybe Made the page go back. We're giving to you in chronological order so you can understand why the Apostle Paul is in the situation that he's in. So can you read that?
All right, Acts 24:1. And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest descended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus,
Yeah, Tertullus.
Tertullus,
Go ahead.
who informed the governor against Paul.
So now after 5 days, because remember we just read in the last chapter, he said, I'm going to hear you when your accusers come. Right?
Right.
I'm going to hear you when your accusers are also come. So now it's saying after 5 days, Ananias the high priest, the same one that said smite Paul in the mouth, right? Descended with the elders and with a certain orator named Tertullus. I got the Bible dictionary here. I'm going to read about Tertullus and I'm going to go to the word orator. It says Tertullus in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. It says a diminutive of Tertius. It was a name borne by the professional advocate employed by the Jews to state their case against Paul before Felix, the procurator of Judea. Now I'm gonna go to orator. So it says he was a what? Let me go back. Just lost the page. It says he was a professional advocate employed by the Jews. Now when you go to orator, it says I'm gonna go right to the point when it mentions him. It says a public speaker, especially an advocate, Acts 24:1, which is what we just read. One was Tertullus, whom the Jews employed to speak against Paul before Felix. Not that they lacked eloquence, but because Tertullus, a Roman, could make the accusation in Latin, the language of the Roman court. So that could have been one of the reasons why they had got him,
Right.
to speak for them, because he knew Latin, and also he was a public speaker. He was an advocate for them. So basically, he was speaking like on their behalf.
Right.
Like how a nigga get locked up, a guy get locked up, and he wound up in the bookings. Then the next morning, you got the lawyer, so-called lawyer there. So go ahead, read verse 2.
Okay. And when he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, seeing that by thee we enjoy great quietness.
He kissing his ass, basically. See, by you, Felix, the governor, we enjoy great quietness. Go ahead.
And that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by thy providence.
Very worthy deeds are done to this nation by your providence. Go ahead.
We accept it always and in all places.
Which he could have been a Jew, the new Latin as well, or maybe an actual cracker. Who knows?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And in all places, most noble Felix, and all thankfulness. Notwithstanding that I be not further tedious unto thee, I pray thee that thou wouldest hear us of thy clemency,
or mercy.
Clemency of few words.
All right, move it. Go ahead.
For we have found this man a pestilent fellow.
The Apostle Paul, he's a pestilent fellow. In other words, whenever he talked, a bunch of shit always popped up. Niggas was talking shit. It was riots that broke out. People wanted to kill him. He was pestilent. In other words, they looked at him like a nuisance, like a disease, like a pestilence. Go ahead. Like something they wanted to get rid of. Go on.
And a mover of
That's why I said away with this man. He shouldn't be on the earth. In the previous chapters, read on.
The next part going to explain it. And a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world.
That's what they were saying. This guy stirring up all these Israelites, man, with his teachings. Go ahead.
And a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes.
Go ahead.
Who also have gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and will have judged according to our law.
Yeah, we took and judged. We have took him and judged them according to our law. You got something to say?
No.
Oh, we have took him and judged them according to our law. We would have judged him according to our law. Go ahead. He said we would have judged him according to our law. So he could have been an Israelite. He said our.
Yeah.
Could have been, or just speaking on behalf of the Jews.
Or
on behalf of the Jews. Well, this is what they got to say.
Translating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But the chief captain, Lysias, came upon us and with great violence took him away out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come unto thee by examining.
See? Lysias, the chief captain Lysias, right? That's Claudius Lysias. That's the same guy that grabbed Paul up in the 21st chapter. Go ahead.
Commanding his accusers to come unto thee
that was said in the letter. Go ahead.
By examining of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all. Mayest take knowledge of all these things whereof we are accused.
We accuse him.
Go
ahead.
And the Jews also assented, saying that these things were so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, true that. Go ahead.
Then Paul, after the governor had beckoned unto him to speak.
So the governor said, all right, now, Paul, I want to hear what you got to say. Because he said that before in the last chapter. The last verse, he said, I'm going to hear you when your accusers come. So they said their peace. Now you're going to see your peace, Paul. Go ahead.
To speak answer for as much.
So the apostles was getting locked up and shit. You know? Going before magistrates and all that. That's going to happen again now.
Yeah.
That's going to happen again now. Go ahead.
For as answer for as
GMS, man, is the one of the Most High is dealing with exclusively. Begin with the elders. That's just the way that it is. You got guys in other camps that's men of the Lord, but they're going to come out of that madness that they in with y'all guys. Go ahead.
answer for as much as I know that thou hast been of many years a judge unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself.
So I'm going to answer for myself. Go ahead.
Because that thou mayest understand that there are yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem for to worship.
Go on.
And
No, that was that. What verse is that? Verse 10?
That's verse. I'm reading verse 12. I'm going on verse 12 now.
Go ahead.
Okay, verse 12. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people.
He said, I wasn't disputing with no man. I wasn't raising up no people. Go ahead.
Neither in the synagogues nor in the city. Neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me.
He said, all this shit they accuse me of, they can't prove it. It's false accusations. They're making all this shit up. That's why when you go back to Acts, the 21st chapter and 28th verse, it says, to my Bible, it says, I'm just going to just read some of it. It says, he teaches all men everywhere against the people and the law, and in this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple and polluted this holy place. Those are one of the things that they was accusing him of. Paul's like, yo, they can't prove nothing that they accusing me of, man. Go ahead.
But this I confess unto thee
That's what scripture speak about, suffering wrongfully. You know?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Suffering for righteousness' sake. That's an example.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But
see, now you could tie the scriptures in better. You know?
Right.
Go ahead.
But this I confess unto thee, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the Most High of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets.
Because they're saying teaching against the prophets. Paul like, whoa, wait a second. Hold on, son. Wait, what the fuck are you talking about? I believe everything that's written in the law and in the prophets, man. What the fuck these guys talking about? That's basically what Paul,
Right.
what he was saying.
And have hope toward the Most High, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both the just and unjust.
Yep. Both of the just and the unjust. Yep. Go ahead.
And herein do I exercise.
Go ahead.
Excuse me. And herein.
Go on.
No problem. And herein do I exercise myself to have always a conscience void of offense towards the Most High and toward men. Now, after many years, I came to bring alms to my nation and offerings. Whereupon certain Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with multitude nor with tumult.
That's why I said after the 7 days, because you had the four Jews that had a vow on them. When you go back to Acts 21st chapter, it speaks about 4 Jews that had four men that had a vow on them, that it said to purify themselves and shave their heads and so on and so forth. So after them 7 days, go ahead, certain Jews from Jerusalem,
found me purified in the temple. Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with multitude nor with tumult.
So I wasn't starting up no strife, wasn't a multitude rioting, wasn't having no uproar, no none of that. Go ahead.
Who ought to have been here before thee and object if they had aught against me.
Go ahead.
Or else let these same here say, if they have found any evil doing in me while I stood before the council,
let them say they found any evil. Go ahead.
Except it be for this one voice that I cried standing among them, touching the resurrection of the dead, I am called and questioned by you this day.
So Paul's saying, he's saying, if they found any evil doing in me, except for this one voice, that touching the resurrection of the dead, I'm called in question by you this day. Go ahead.
Verse 20.
Verse 22. You just read that one.
Okay. And when Felix heard these things, having more perfect.
Oh, that was verse 21?
Yeah, that was verse 21.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, alright, so let's go to Acts 25th chapter now. We're giving it to you point by point so you can understand. So now the Apostle Paul, after Paul was taken by the 470 soldiers unto the governor Felix, and Claudius Lysias had written a letter to the governor Felix. After 5 days, Ananias the high priest, he had descended with the elders. And Tertullus, who was an orator, spoke on their behalf and said the Jews' behalf. Now the Apostle Paul is speaking his behalf. Okay? Now read that. Acts 21, Acts 25, verse 1. You can read the whole chapter.
Okay, Acts 25 and 1, it says.
Want me to take over, if you're reading a lot?
No,
His
no,
voice or
no.
something?
It's up to you through the spirit,
Go
bro.
ahead, go ahead.
All right. Now, when Festus was come